He left for school like every other morning. Rode past the park, crossed the bridge, and vanished. No witnesses. No clues. For 4 years, nothing. Until after a heavy storm, a city crew found his bike, still chained deep inside a storm drain. The sun hadn't yet broken through the early April fog that blanketed the streets of Elmridge, Illinois. It was the kind of morning where the world felt half asleep, wrapped in dew and quiet. On Maple Avenue, rows of single-story homes sat behind thin fences and trimmed hedges, their lawns littered with tiny yellow dandelions. At number 217, a screen door creaked open. Josh Taylor stepped outside wearing his favorite navy blue hoodie, backpack bouncing slightly on his shoulders. He was 10 years old, small for his age but fast on his feet and curious about everything. His dark hair stuck out under the edges of his hood and his sneakers were already scuffed from too many backyard adventures. "Helmet," his mother called from inside. Josh turned, rolled his eyes, then ducked back in. Moments later, he reappeared with a bright green bike helmet fastened unevenly under his chin. "Back by 3, she added, standing in the doorway holding a coffee mug. Her name was Lauren Taylor, mid-30s, single mom of 2 boys, and the assistant manager at the Elmridge Pharmacy. Josh hopped onto his red mountain bike and gave her a quick salute. "Later, Mom." Lauren smiled, waving. "Be careful." Josh sped down the driveway, wheels crunching over gravel. He pedaled hard up the slight incline, vanishing into the mist. The time was 7:38 a.m. That was the last time anyone saw him. The Elmridge Elementary School was just under a mile away, a straight shot past the dog park, over a narrow footbridge, and then one right turn at Miller Street. Josh usually made it in 10 minutes. By 8:15 a.m., Lauren's phone buzzed at work. It was the school office. "Hi, this is Mrs. Langston at Elmridge. Just checking, is Josh out sick today?" Lauren felt her stomach tighten. "No, he left the house on time." There was a pause. "He never checked in. We've looked. He's not here." Lauren didn't remember driving back home, just the way the coffee spilled in her lap as she dropped her mug and ran. She retraced his usual route, calling his name, expecting to see his red bike tipped over somewhere, maybe a scraped knee, a flat tire, anything. But there was nothing. At 9:22 a.m., Lauren called the police. Officer Darren Monk was the first to arrive. He asked the routine questions. When did he leave? What was he wearing? Did he have friends he might have gone to see? But when he learned Josh had been on his bike and there were no signs of a crash or incident, his tone changed. Was he upset about anything? Has he ever run off before? No, Lauren snapped. He's 10. He's responsible. He's never even missed the bus without telling me. By 11 a.m., the Elmridge Police Department issued an official missing child bulletin. Volunteers from the school and neighbors began walking the path to school. The dog park, the footbridge, the overgrown trails that ran behind the creek, nothing. By that evening, when helicopters buzzed overhead with searchlights sweeping through treetops, the town of Elmridge had already changed. Detective Alan Reese was brought in from nearby Springfield by 8 a.m. the next morning. He was a broad-shouldered man in his late 40s, known for his calm voice and methodical approach. He'd worked 2 missing child cases before, one with a happy ending, one without. He met Lauren at the station. "I'm not here to ask you if Josh ran away," he said. "I'm here to find out who took him." Those words hit her like a stone. Until then, she'd held onto the idea that maybe, just maybe, he'd gotten lost, scared, hiding somewhere. But Detective Reese wasn't offering false comfort. And she appreciated that. They mapped the route again. Josh left at 7:38 a.m. He should have passed the Thompsons' yard around 7:42. They didn't see him. The footbridge camera had been broken for weeks. The only person who thought they might have seen Josh was Mrs. Kirsch, who lived at the corner of Miller. She saw a boy on a red bike turn toward the storm drain at the end of the street but wasn't sure of the time. The storm drain on Miller Street ran underneath the main road and emptied near a creek that ran through the forest behind Elmridge. The grate was wide enough to walk through if you ducked. Lauren had never liked it. Neither did Josh. "It smells like monster breath," he used to say. That afternoon, a search team entered the storm drain, flashlights cutting through water and shadows. They found wrappers, graffiti, and an old boot but no bike. No boy. Still, something bothered Reese. Kids don't disappear in broad daylight without someone seeing it. Not unless the place was familiar. Or the person was. That night it rained hard. Lauren sat on her porch, listening to thunder roll over the town. Toby, her youngest, was asleep inside. She stared at Josh's favorite sweatshirt, still hanging on the coat rack. She clutched the missing person's flyer in her hand. His school photo smiled up at her lopsided grin. Chipped tooth, confident eyes. "Be out there, baby," she whispered. "Be brave." Across town, in a darkened house with boarded windows near the storm drain, a porch light flickered. Behind it, an old man with hollow eyes watched the rain trace lines down his glass. He didn't move, not even when lightning lit the storm drain just beyond his backyard. In the months following Josh's disappearance, Elmridge changed in subtle but permanent ways. Porch lights stayed on longer. Parents walked their kids to school in pairs, even the older ones. Windows that were once left open during warm afternoons were now locked tight, curtains drawn. Lauren Taylor didn't take down the missing posters. She refreshed them every few weeks, taped to lampposts, pinned in diners, posted in the library and church bulletin boards. She made laminated versions for weatherproofing. Some store owners asked her to remove them after a while, but most let them stay. Not because they thought Josh was coming back, but because they didn't want to forget. A year passed, then another. No bike was ever found. No backpack. No body. The case file grew thicker, but not deeper. Detective Reese stayed on it for over a year before finally being reassigned to Springfield's Narcotics Division. He left Lauren with a promise. "If anything new surfaces, I'll be back." But she saw the guilt behind his eyes. He thought the trail was dead. Others moved on. Kids grew up. Teachers retired. But Lauren didn't stop. She worked her pharmacy job part-time, spent her evenings on forums for missing children, read books on cold cases, watched surveillance footage she'd requested through public record laws. She'd gone through over 140 hours of dashcam recordings from school buses that traveled near Miller Street that week. Nothing. But someone had seen something. She could feel it. On the other side of town lived Eli Thomas, 16 now, lanky and awkward in a quiet way. He'd been 12 when Josh vanished and lived just 3 houses down from the Taylor home. They'd ridden their bikes together once or twice. Not close friends, but close enough. Eli still walked by the footbridge every day on his way home from high school. He couldn't forget the morning Josh disappeared, even though he'd tried. He remembered it because it was foggy and strange and because of what he saw, or thought he saw. Back then, he hadn't told anyone. He wasn't sure it mattered, but it had eaten away at him for 4 years. That morning, as he passed the same spot by the creek, he stopped. His gaze drifted toward the storm drain at the edge of the woods. The opening was almost hidden now, grown over with vines and weeds, but he could still picture it, and the figure standing there. It had been early before school, and Eli had taken the longer route to avoid some older kids who bullied him near the dog park. That meant he passed the creek. And from where he stood that morning, he remembered seeing a red bike leaning near the drain. And someone else, not a kid. Someone tall. A man. Standing by the mouth of the drain. Motionless. Eli told himself for years it was just a trick of the light. a shadow. But lately, he'd started to dream about it. In his dreams, the man looked straight at him, smiled. On the third anniversary of Josh's disappearance, the town placed a memorial bench near the schoolyard. It was plain and wooden with a brass plaque that read, "In memory of Josh Taylor, always pedaling ahead." Lauren hated the word memory. She'd insisted on hope, but the school board overruled her. At the dedication ceremony, she stood beside Toby, now 8, holding a bouquet of sunflowers. He didn't remember much about his brother anymore. Just fragments. "Mom," he whispered, "do you think Josh is watching us?" She didn't answer. Instead, she stepped forward and placed the flowers beneath the plaque. Afterward, as the crowd thinned, Lauren noticed someone lingering near the edge of the grass. A tall teenager, hands buried deep in his hoodie pocket. He looked like he wanted to speak but kept walking. She didn't realize it was Eli until later that night. That same week, Lauren received a letter in her mailbox. No stamp, just tucked under the lid. It read, "Check the drain again." But this time, look deeper. There was no signature. Lauren took it to the police station. The officer on duty was Deputy Janine Ruiz, young and relatively new to the Elmridge force. She'd only joined the department 2 years earlier and had read Josh's case file front to back. "Did you recognize the handwriting?" Ruiz asked. "No. And no one else touches my mailbox but me." "Could be a prank," Ruiz said, though not unkindly. "Kids getting bored. Or it could be the only thing anyone said about my son in 2 years," Lauren snapped. Ruiz paused. "Want me to take a look with you?" They drove to the Miller Street storm drain together. The entrance was partially hidden, now overgrown with creeping vines and half-choked by fallen leaves. Ruiz knelt down and pulled out her flashlight. The inside was damp, mossy, filled with debris. Water trickled along the bottom. They scanned the inside, nothing but old cans, a boot, a plastic tricycle tire. But then Ruiz's beam hit something in the distance. A dark shape at the far end. Round. Metallic. She turned to Lauren. "I think that's a chain." The next day, Eli stood outside the Taylor house, shifting nervously on his feet. He rang the bell once. Then again. Lauren opened the door in sweatpants, her eyes tired but alert. "Hi, Mrs. Taylor? I'm Eli. I used to live down the street." "I remember," she said carefully. "I saw something," he blurted. "The day Josh disappeared. I think it might matter now." She stared at him, unsure whether to scream or hug him. But instead, she opened the door wider. "Come in." It had been raining for 5 straight days in Elmridge, the heavy, relentless kind that seeped into cracks and flooded basements. The kind of rain that changed the sound of the town. Roads slicked over with runoff, culverts overflowed, and tree limbs littered sidewalks like abandoned branches of memory. By the 5th morning, the city sent out work crews to inspect drainage points across town. At the Miller Street storm drain, a 2-man crew in neon ponchos was tasked with clearing a blockage. Leaves, trash, and years of sediment had nearly sealed the mouth. One of the workers, Dennis Yarber, crouched and pulled at a tangled mess with a metal rake. "Something's jammed in there," he muttered to his partner. "Tree branch." "No. Something solid." He reached in, fingers brushing cold steel. The object was wedged in deep but not buried. It had been placed. Deliberately. Dennis leaned into the drain, half his body inside. He tugged harder. And then, slowly, something emerged from the shadows. A rusted red bicycle, its frame bent slightly, the paint chipped with time. The front tire was flat, the seat moldy. But the most striking thing wasn't the bike itself. It was the chain still locked around the frame and the support bar inside the drain. A thick, rusted bicycle chain fastened tight. Dennis stood up, soaked and pale. "Call this in," he whispered. "Now." Detective Alan Reese was at his cabin in southern Illinois when the call came. He hadn't worked a child case since Josh Taylor. Hadn't worked much at all, truthfully, after taking early retirement last year. But the moment the Elmridge Sheriff's Department said the words "red bike," he was already packing a bag. By nightfall, he was back in the town he'd never really left behind. He met Deputy Ruiz at the station. "It's still chained?" he asked. "Yep. Locked to the rebar. We're having it cut out carefully. Evidence guys are taking it slow. Serial number match? Already confirmed. It's Josh's bike." Reese exhaled and sat down. "Where was it?" "Inside the storm drain. Same one from the original search zone. But we never saw the bike. Either we missed it or someone put it there later." Ruiz nodded. Lauren was in the middle of folding laundry when her phone rang. She didn't recognize the number, but something in her gut twisted before she even picked up. "This is Lauren Taylor." "Ms. Taylor, this is Detective Reese." Her legs gave out before she even heard the rest. She sank to the floor, laundry forgotten. "We found Josh's bike," he said gently. She didn't speak. "It was inside the storm drain on Miller. Still chained. We're reopening the case." The line was silent for several seconds. "I want to see it," she said. At the evidence facility the next morning, Lauren stood behind glass, staring at what had once been her son's favorite thing in the world. The bike was corroded from years of exposure but unmistakable. A Pokémon sticker was still visible under the grime. The handlebars were worn. The spokes bent slightly. The chain had been cut but laid next to it on the table. "Still locked." Lauren pressed a trembling hand to the glass. "He loved that bike." Reese stood beside her. "The rust tells us it's been there for a while, maybe the whole time. Or maybe it was moved and returned. We're still analyzing." She looked at him. "So you believe he went into that drain?" "I believe someone took him off that path and used the drain to hide the evidence. Maybe more." Forensic teams went back into the storm drain with better lighting, new gear, and specialized equipment. They scanned the interior wall where the bike had been locked. Behind it, barely visible beneath layers of mineral buildup, was a small scratched arrow pointing deeper into the tunnel. Deputy Ruiz followed it, crawling for 10 yards before the tunnel widened slightly. There she found a tiny plastic charm shaped like a lightning bolt. She bagged it carefully and crawled back. Lauren later confirmed it had belonged to Josh. It was part of a clip-in keychain he kept on his backpack zipper. "Why would it be that far in?" she asked. "Breadcrumbs," Reese said. "If he was trying to leave a trail." Ruiz looked uncomfortable. "Or if someone else dropped it while bringing something in." That night, Eli couldn't sleep. He lay awake, staring at the shadows dancing across his ceiling. His conversation with Lauren the week before had left him shaken. He had finally told her what he remembered: the red bike by the drain, the tall figure standing nearby. And now they'd found the bike. His memory hadn't lied. But if that was real, then so was the man. He got out of bed, pulled on a hoodie, and quietly stepped outside. The rain had slowed to a drizzle and the air was thick with the smell of mud and moss. Eli walked to the end of Miller Street, to the place he'd avoided for years. The storm drain gaped open, newly cleared. Yellow police tape cordoned it off, but Eli stood just outside the line. Across the creek, in the darkened yard of the last house on the block, an upstairs light flickered on. Eli squinted. The figure in the window didn't move. Just stared. Eli's breath caught. It was the same shape, same height, same stillness. He turned and ran. Back at the Taylor house, Lauren sat at the kitchen table with the bike key in her hand. She'd found it in the back of her jewelry box, tucked behind her son's baby tooth and a broken charm bracelet. She hadn't seen it in years. Reese had confirmed the lock on the chain was intact when it was found. That meant only 2 keys could have opened it. One was in Lauren's hand. The other? Still missing. Detective Reese stared at the key Lauren had handed him. Scratched but still functional, the tiny silver piece matched the lock found on Josh's bike exactly. The serials aligned. It was the original. So whoever locked the bike in the drain, he said, either had the second key or used this one and returned it later. Lauren crossed her arms. That key never left this house. Never. Reese didn't argue. He just wrote something down in his notebook. The truth sat heavy in the room. Someone had access. Someone close. Or someone clever. We're not dealing with a random snatch, he finally said. They knew the drain. They knew his route. They knew when to act. Deputy Janine Ruiz spent that week combing through old case files. She pulled every incident report from the month Josh disappeared. Noise complaints, suspicious vehicles, anonymous tips. One stood out. April 4th, 2017, 2 days after Josh vanished. A neighbor near the storm drain, Harold Spence, had called in a report about kids trespassing near his property. The officer had gone to check, found nothing, filed it as low priority. Ruiz decided to pay him a visit. Harold Spence lived alone in a weather-beaten 2-story house that backed directly up to the creek. His windows were covered with faded curtains and 2 large dogs barked behind a chain-link fence as Ruiz approached. He answered the door with a noticeable limp, his eyes bleary, white stubble covering his jaw. "I don't do interviews," he muttered. "I'm not here for an interview," Ruiz replied. "Just a few follow-up questions about an old report you made." He hesitated. "Which one?" "April 4th, 2017. Kids near your property. You called it in, right?" "Yeah. Heard them out by the drain. Figured they were tagging walls or drinking or something." "Did you see anyone?" "No. Just voices. And a flashlight flickering. I yelled, they ran." "You sure they were kids?" He paused. "Sounded like it." She noticed his eyes shift toward the backyard as he spoke. Something in the way he said sounded didn't sit right. "Did you ever go into the storm drain yourself?" He laughed dryly. "Lady, I'm 70. I can barely make it down the porch steps." Ruiz gave a polite nod. "Let me know if you remember anything else." He shut the door before she finished the sentence. Back at the department, Reese reviewed the audio logs from the initial interviews in 2017. Harold Spence had been questioned briefly then. He claimed no knowledge of anything suspicious, said he kept to himself. The only note Reese had made at the time seems annoyed. Nothing useful. He didn't like that now. So he pulled up a satellite map. Spence's house was the closest to the drain. Closer than the park. Closer than the footbridge. From his back porch, he could have watched the whole path Josh usually took. And no one thought to search his property, Reese thought bitterly. Not then. But now. Eli Thomas didn't tell his parents he'd seen someone in Spence's window. He wasn't sure it had even been him. But the next night, he went back, this time with a flashlight and his phone recording in his pocket. He waited until well after midnight and approached the edge of the Spence property near the creek. Something about the backyard fence bothered him. It wasn't just the dogs or the mess of junk piled near the shed. It was the fact that the vines growing near the storm drain had been cut recently. Not trimmed. Cleared. Someone had made sure the entrance was exposed again. He crouched low and shined his light under the drain's lip and saw a narrow gap behind one of the side walls. A man-made hole barely wider than a backpack. A hole that hadn't been there 4 years ago. The next morning, Eli showed the video to Reese and Ruiz. In the grainy footage, the camera swept across the storm drain's interior. At the 48-second mark, it caught the edge of what looked like a hidden tunnel behind a concrete slab, part of the drainage system, but sealed on one end with sheet metal. Ruiz squinted. "That's not city work. That's been hollowed out." Reese nodded. "Call in Public Works. We're opening it up." They went in at dawn with proper clearance and a small team. The dogs from Spence's yard barked constantly as they worked. It took 20 minutes to remove the rusted bolts and pry the metal aside. When the sheet finally gave way, it revealed a short tunnel that curved sharply, left the walls narrowing as it continued. At the end of the tunnel was a room. It was barely tall enough to stand in. Dirt floor. One broken camping chair. A moldy blanket. An old, rusted lantern. Empty wrappers. A child's sock, long faded. Lauren, watching from outside the drain, clutched her mouth. Ruiz, inside, whispered this was lived in. Reese crouched low. "Get forensics in here. Bag everything." As the tech swept the area, Ruiz found something else wedged in a corner. A notebook. Water damaged. Molded. But inside, a single legible page. April 3rd, there's a boy outside again. Keeps taking the same path. Wonder if he sees me. Should move supplies. Too open. No name. No signature. Just the location, creek tunnel, left wall. Ruiz turned to Reese. That's not a child's handwriting. That evening, Lauren returned home to find a note under her windshield wiper. Same handwriting as the first. You're getting close. Be careful who you trust. She looked around. No cars nearby. No movement. She stepped back into the house, locked the door, and reached for her phone. I want to see that room again, she told Reese. We're not done yet. Back at the drain, forensics confirmed partial fingerprints on the notebook smudged, but not Josh's. Too large. They'd need more. But Reese felt something shift. This wasn't a random predator. This was someone who watched. Someone who'd seen the boy's routine. Chosen a hiding spot. Used the drain as more than just a hiding place, it was a lair. And now the predator was watching again. It took 2 more days to get the fingerprint results. While the lab processed the notebook and plastic wrappers, Detective Reese and Deputy Ruiz worked every known connection around Harold Spence. They pulled employment history, property records, medical reports. Nothing concrete tied him to Josh's disappearance. Until Ruiz looked deeper into his past. Did you know Spence used to work for the school district? She asked. Reese looked up sharply. Doing what? Janitorial contract. Maintenance. Elmridge Elementary. From 2004 to 2015. Josh started kindergarten in 2012. So he would have known the kids. Known the routes, Reese muttered. And the schedules, Ruiz added. And that storm drain's been there for decades. What better place to watch from if you already know the blind spots? Reese stood up, grabbed his jacket. Let's talk to him again. They found Spence sitting on his porch, drinking something from a metal thermos, the dogs unusually quiet. His eyes were glassy but alert. He didn't seem surprised to see them. You came back, he said flatly. We always do, Reese said. We have questions about the tunnel. Spence didn't respond. We found a room behind the drain. With a chair. Wrappers. A notebook. Your notebook. Still nothing. You used to work at the school, Ruiz pressed. You knew the kids. You had access. You saw them walk past every day. I don't go anywhere near that school, he muttered. Not anymore. That notebook had your prints. That got his attention. A flicker in his eyes. Ruiz stepped forward. Tell us what happened, Harold. Did you take Josh? Silence. Reese leaned in. Was it you in the drain? Or were you protecting someone else? And then Harold Spence whispered, he said he just wanted to scare the boy. Reese froze. Who did? Spence didn't answer. Back at the station, Reese and Ruiz pulled out the original list of utility employees and contractors from 2016 and 2017. People who'd worked near the storm system, who had keys to gates and storm panels. One name reappeared on several logs, Dennis Yarber, the man who had discovered the bike. Reese's stomach twisted. They called Dennis back in. He arrived calm, confused. Claimed he'd simply done his job. But as they questioned him about the day of discovery, how he'd found the chain, how he'd known where to dig, he slipped. It was sticking out from the silt, he said. Shiny. But the photos taken that day proved otherwise. The bike had been fully buried in muck, obscured. You're lying, Reese said. You knew where it was. You put it there. Dennis's expression cracked. His voice rose. I didn't hurt him. Ruiz leaned forward. But you were there? His voice dropped. It was supposed to be a prank. Just a prank. Spence said he knew a place to hide him for a few hours. Told me the kid would get scared and run home. That's all. Reese's fists clenched. What did you do, Dennis? He swallowed. Josh got scared. Panicked. He tried to run. Spence blocked the exit. He hit his head on the tunnel wall. We didn't mean. Where is he? Ruiz snapped. Dennis looked down. Still there. beyond the crawl space, behind the bricks. We sealed it. That evening, a recovery team returned to the tunnel. They broke through a false wall just beyond the hidden room layers of cinder blocks and dirt. Behind it, a narrow space no more than 4 feet wide. Inside were the skeletal remains of a small child. Torn clothing, a rusted lunchbox, pair of broken glasses, one sneaker. Lauren wasn't allowed to enter. She stood at the edge of the drain, gripping the police tape like it could hold her upright. Reese approached quietly. "We're doing DNA confirmation, but it's him." She nodded slowly. No scream, no collapse, just silence. For years of torment congealing into cold finality. "My boy," she whispered. At trial, both Harold Spence and Dennis Yarber were charged. Spence was convicted of murder, kidnapping, and concealment of a corpse. Dennis, who cooperated fully, received a lesser sentence but would still serve decades. In the courtroom, Lauren sat front row every day, her jaw clenched, Josh's old keychain in her hand. When Spence was asked if he had anything to say, he said only, "I was lonely." The judge's voice rang louder than usual when she said, "Life without parole." Elmridge mourned together. The bench near the school was updated to reflect the truth. A memorial plaque was placed at the creek, where wildflowers grew naturally. Lauren buried what remained of Josh on a warm May afternoon. The town came. Eli came. Even Reese, who had declined all previous ceremonies, stood in the back, hat in hand. Afterward, Lauren walked the path Josh had taken that day one last time. From the porch to the driveway. From the driveway past the trees. Past the park. To the footbridge. Then to the storm drain. The grate was sealed now, welded shut by the city. She stood before it for a long time, the wind tugging at her sleeves. "I found you," she said softly. "You're safe now." As summer settled into Elmridge, things slowly returned to normal. But not quite the same. Parents still walked their kids. Porch lights still burned late. The town had learned that even the safest places cast long shadows. Lauren kept Josh's keychain on her rearview mirror. She began volunteering with missing child organizations, helping other families navigate the dark. Eli helped her write a community safety guide for local schools. Detective Reese formally retired this time for good, but he still called every few weeks. "I just wanted to say," he told Lauren on his last call, "I'm sorry we didn't find him sooner." She didn't hesitate. "But you found him. That's what matters." She hung up, looked out the window at the sun rising over the trees, and held Josh's keychain in her hand.